Hey, everybody. Welcome again to the Before the Hammer Strikes podcast. I'm Bjorn Johnson, General Manager at TraVek. Today, I have got probably one of my favorite guests to join us, and I don't mean any discredit to anybody else that we've had on the podcast, but our guest today, we have a history. We spend a lot of time together on a weekly basis, and that's Mike Toney. Mike, thank you for being here and being a part of this.
I'm honored to be on your podcast.
Excellent. Now, Mike he's a trainer. He initiates the Sandler Sales System in different organizations. He's been here in the area for a long time and has worked with a lot of really amazing businesses. And we're going to get into that a little bit and who he is and what he does. But first off, Mike, just tell us a little about who you are. Like, have you lived in Arizona your whole life?
Yeah, I am a native,
Okay.
Which is very rare.
It is rare.
I mean, you transplanted in a
I
few
did.
years ago.
Yep, I did.
And so I grew up in the 60s and 70s here in Phoenix and moved away for a couple years, but I had to come back.
Okay.
It's just one of those.
Where, just curious, where was that stint away from Arizona?
We lived on Coronado Island
Okay.
in San Diego.
All right.
And my dad owned a restaurant there, and it was tougher than he thought it was going to be to make that work, so he came back.
Okay. Yeah, that'll drive somebody back to Arizona for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it is rare that you're local and that you're a native. We don't run into that very often. Everybody's from somewhere else.
Right.
So you grew up here. Tell us a little bit about your career. Like, what experiences did you have?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much to you, and we can't fit in a 30-minute podcast, unfortunately. But
don't bring my weight up.
That's not what I'm trying to say.
I'm kidding.
You've been making great strides in that, actually. We've got some accountability there. But tell us a little bit about your history and your experience and what brought you to where you're at.
Yeah, I grew up as a design engineer for a large employer in town, Motorola, which doesn't exist here anymore.
Yeah.
They were the biggest employer in town.
I think I had a Motorola flip phone at some point.
Me too. And I was on the government side of that, and I was a design engineer. And from there, I got hired to be a consultant for Hewlett Packard. And I traveled around the United States teaching for Hewlett Packard. And I was teaching this big class once, and I saw these salespeople making a lot more money than I did. So about 20 years into an engineering career when I decided to go into sales. And from there, I fell in love with the processes, the psychology, the whole process of selling, and became Hewlett Packard's #1 sales guy for 7 years straight.
Wow.
And then decided to leave and start my own organization.
So I want to pause there for a second because there's something interesting there that I just heard that I think is probably valuable to our audience too. So you went from engineer to salesperson.
Yeah.
And not only salesperson, but top performing salesperson.
Correct.
For HP.
That's not an easy transition by any means.
No, and that's why I'm bringing it up. Like the mindset of an engineer is very different than the mindset of a salesperson to a certain extent. What was it about? I mean, you mentioned a few things, the psychology behind it and things like that, but that's a big jump. What gave you the confidence or the motivation to say, wow, I'm going to switch gears and outside of the money? Obviously, the money is great in sales for somebody that does well. But
I would tell you there's two moments that really stand out to me. The first one was when I had a manager believe in me more than I did, because the transition wasn't easy. Hewlett Packard put about $250,000 of training into me before they gave me a territory. So they believed in me enough to invest in me. And the second piece of that is once I started to fail, they didn't stop investing in me, and they actually sent me to Sandler, where I learned not only technique, but I learned a process. And it's a process based on the psychology. So once I figured out the mechanics, being an engineer, the mechanics of a process has defects associated with it and how to manage those defects out of the process. And you understood the root causes from the psychological point of view, everything was fixable.
it became easy.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't discredit your hard work or your effort. Like, I think it becomes easier, I should say.
Well, I think anybody that's transitioning into a new career needs to learn how to get their nose bloodied up a little bit and fail, which happens to be one of the rules we go by: fail early, fail fast.
Yeah. And this is interesting because there's business owners that listen to this podcast, and I think there's a little nugget in there and some value as far as what HP did there. You mentioned that when you were struggling or you were failing, they didn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. they sent you somewhere that you could refine who you were, really understand your craft and get better at what you do. And that then fast forward turned into a top performing sales rep for them, which was better for the business. I think sometimes as business leaders or business owners, in an effort to try to fail fast, we may throw the baby out with the bathwater on somebody who may have some really great potential. What's your perspective on that?
Well, first of all, I have the belief that sales is a learned skill because nobody in my family could have ever gone directly into that career. So it's not something I was born with. So the fact that it's a learned skill means that you have to have the right training, which means teaching people what they don't know. But then coaching is, okay, you know what to do, but it's still not working for you. So
Yeah.
what's the distinction that's missing?
Yeah.
And that's really what coaching does. And sometimes it's an intellectual flaw or sometimes it's an emotional flaw. That's what a good coach would do. And that's what I found out with me was I had a bunch of distortion in my head from my childhood and my upbringing from being in the restaurant business or my mom being a cocktail waitress. Yeah, we call that head trash.
Sure. So you're carrying some of that with you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, gosh, what a cool story. And from an Arizona local, sounds like you had a great career with HP, and then you made the choice. Well, I think I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And talk me through that. What was that decision like? What motivated that?
Well, there were two or three motivations. One was nobody believed in Hewlett Packard more than I did. I loved the company. I loved the product line. It was going through some turmoil with leadership. However, when you're good at sales, it's always actuals plus growth, actuals plus growth, actuals plus growth. You do that 7 years in a row, and soon you're trying to manage a quota of $250 million.
Right.
Which, if you do the math on that, the commissions are pretty small.
Yeah.
I figured that I could go sell $1 million of whatever I wanted to do and make a lot more money that way.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
and reduce the stress a little bit. Not only that, but just like I would be coaching a client, my purpose was to really contribute to people.
Okay.
And I love that part of why I decided to leave Hewlett Packard. I wanted to help people in a more meaningful way.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And so I started Conquest, yeah.
Okay. And Conquest is your company.
Yeah, Conquest Training Systems.
And Conquest Training Systems is where you live, breathe today, and you're in the community and you're helping other businesses.
Correct, yeah.
That leap of faith to start your own thing is probably not unfamiliar for a lot of our audience. Like some of these business owners or CEOs or even business leaders have made that jump. And it can be scary.
Yeah.
Especially when you're walking away from a salary or you're walking away from great commissions as a performing sales rep. What advice do you have for them on? I know it's scary, and maybe they're just getting going. You're farther along in your career and in your journey, but when you were first starting, like what would be one thing that you could share with some of these companies that are, 200,000 to 500,000, and they're just trying to figure it out?
Right. First of all, I wish I could start again 30 years ago because I've learned so much about this topic.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you need to start thinking about in my mind is the significance of what you're trying to accomplish. Every company has a unique way of being significant, and sometimes we lose that from the standpoint, a technician that perhaps was doing an AC repair decides that he wants to open up his own shop. But he doesn't realize that if he does it differently, if he brings his own magic to it, there's a significance to it that makes it not a commodity.
Right.
Like if you don't have that significance, then you just are competing over whose hourly rate is cheaper or whose air conditioner is going to be cheaper to install. So there's a significant piece, and that transitions into your purpose, your company purpose. Once you have a significant reason to be there for people, then it automatically leads into what we call the brand experience, which is when people start talking about brand, it gets confusing because we hear about marketing brand and what they're doing on the internet. That's not what brand is. The brand is nothing more than the experience that the customer has with your company.
Yeah.
And if you can manage that well, your company grows faster.
I couldn't agree more. Like, and there's of all the stresses that come with business ownership or starting a business or running a business, like probably the most important thing to focus on is that brand and your
Yeah.
experience with the customer, because the rest of it is just stuff you're good at,
Right.
right?
Right.
I hope you're good at being an AC technician. That's why you
Right.
started a business, right?
Right.
I think that's great insight. It's good information.
I think it's one of those things that get lost and distorted in the
Yeah.
process, and it all gets focused on what I do and what do I do different, and on me convincing people what I do is better than somebody else. We lose that. We lose the experience and the significance of why we need to be there.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to just kind of move in a different direction for a second.
Sure.
We're talking to business owners, but I love sales. My career has been in sales or sales management and leadership.
And by the way, I think you're one of the best
Oh,
at it. I mean, you really are. You're amazing, and every time I turn around, you amaze me.
I really appreciate you saying that. Like you, I'm passionate about it. And so, I found success being a top performer in sales, and I wanted to be able to share what that looked like with other people. And for me, the impact that I could have was much more meaningful if I could help others to understand that sales doesn't have to be shady and slimy, and you don't have to feel like you got to take a shower when you're done meeting with the customer. And so that's kind of what I want to transition into. At TraVek, we've landed on the importance of the Sandler selling system. Now, you do it just a little bit different than traditional Sandler. And we engage with you as a coach for our team to really help them to get to the next level. Like you, I believe that there is something really special in that sales process, and that connection with the person on a very human level, on a very psychological level that isn't your typical hard close, ram it down your throat, used car salesman sort of approach. You believed in that so much that when you left HP, your adventure was, well, I'm going to start a sales coaching and training and mentoring business that I can share this love with. What is it about Sandler that is so special, not only for a business, but how does that affect the customer?
Yeah, I think in just to recall the fact that I've had every sales training methodology crammed into my head, and Hewlett Packard put a lot of money into that investment. But the thing that made me successful was understanding why people buy. There's a psychological reason why people need to fulfill their desire for whatever they're buying. And it turns out human beings are fairly, I don't want to say predictable, but we're all built off of the same operating system. And our uniqueness comes from our life experiences. So our histories and everything else. So once you understand why people decide to make the choices that they make, it then becomes to how well can I hear and listen to the customer. And that's really what Sandler teaches us to do is get out of this, let's justify our position, let's do a hard close. Let's listen. Let's let them feel heard.
It seems so elementary, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's really that
We're
simple.
not good listeners. We are not
we're
good
terrible.
listeners as human beings. Yeah.
We're terrible. Yeah. If you ask my wife, she says that I hear everything, but I don't actually listen. And she always gives me a hard time because I can repeat back to her exactly what she just said for the last 20 minutes. And she always comes down to me. She says, no, you're hearing what I'm saying, but you're not really listening.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm sorry. I'll take a step back.
By the way, just coach you up here for a second. You got to go 3 or 4 layers underneath what they're saying is not what they're really saying.
Yeah.
Exactly
No,
right.
I get
it. That's just a human thing, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the words to describe what the brain has inside of it, which is all the emotions and the feelings and the interpretations. Those are the things that we have to learn to listen through this generosity.
Yeah.
And if you do, and I've taught your people this, the greatest gift that we can give another human being is let them be heard.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a really cool thing to kind of spearhead off of that is, one of the things you always preach or communicate is that in a sales conversation, it's not about the salesperson.
That's right.
It should always be about the other person. And I think that so many times people, for whatever the reason may be, they make it about themselves, right, in that conversation. And that's when the homeowner or the customer feels the friction and their walls go up and they're scared to communicate what's really going on. And we create this environment that's friction filled and highly emotional in the wrong way, to where we never get to the bottom of what the real reason is that we're even there and,
Right.
and how we can help. And so I think Sandler does a really great job of helping every salesperson take a step back and say, well, it's not about me. It's actually about the homeowner,
Right.
or the customer. And then what does that mean? Well, it means I'm a better listener. It means I'm asking more questions. It means I'm having an authentic, genuine conversation that I think realistically is refreshing.
Right.
You think about in our industry, for instance, people love to get multiple quotes or multiple bids, whether it's a roof or a remodel. They like to get multiple opinions. And I think about if they've had 3 different people they're talking to about a roof that are your traditional salespeople, and then they get to have a meaningful conversation with one of our salespeople around the principles that Sandler teaches, and they're listening and they're making it about the homeowner. Like, how refreshing that has to
Oh,
feel.
it's incredible. And just to backtrack just for a second, everybody has good intention, right? You go
Yeah.
in and, even the worst sales guy wants to help the customer, but they don't realize the unintended consequences of spewing information when it's the wrong time or justifying why they're better.
Yeah.
It creates a defensive mechanism for the other person that people can smell and taste.
Of course.
And it's a horrible experience. And I personally hate amateur salespeople selling me. I mean, and I get, as a business owner, I get 20 to 30 sales calls a week, and I can detect them within a second.
Yeah.
And as a homeowner, I get knocked on and solar trying to be sold to me. And it's horrible. It's just a horrible experience.
Yeah.
And that's just not what a good sales professional should create for a customer.
It's really not. And, something that's interesting is the psychological effect that has on a prospect or a homeowner, can be really damaging. Like, a lot of really horrible salespeople can ruin it for people that have good intentions in
Yeah.
sales, right? Help our audience understand, like, if I'm a homeowner, what should I expect? Like, what should be my red flag where it's like, oh, geez, this is not going the direction that I want, comparatively to somebody that has their best interest in mind?
Yeah, I think the first thing that pops into my head is the cliche techniques. I'm sure you would agree with. Which day is better, Thursday or Friday? You could smell the old sales techniques in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the alternate choice close, or it's just the pressure-oriented things that raise your defensive systems.
Yeah.
If it doesn't feel like the person has your best interest, if you feel like they're trying to get a commission versus really trying to solve a problem for you, they're in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And it just tears me up just be saying this to you right now.
Well, no, and I mean, you're not wrong, and I love the thought process of if you feel it, say it, right? And sometimes I think prospects or homeowners, they're feeling something, and it's not good for them to not say it. It's not good for the salesperson
No,
to not say
absolutely.
it. Like, one of the things that I really appreciate about Sandler is just the Sandler method, is that conversation, that really authentic conversation of, hey, if it's truly not a good fit, like, let's talk about that too.
Yeah, right.
And let's not waste each other's time trying to go through this dog and pony show if it's not going to be a good fit. Like, let's figure that out now before we've spent that much time together.
I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
And if we both determine at the end of this meeting, I'm not going to help you or I can't help you, I need to be honest with you about it. And I think that allows me to go in much more objectively into the conversation with you. I think that lets the customer be more authentic with me.
Yeah.
And if I have a choice in the matter and you have a choice in the matter, then we can come to the right choice at the end of the meeting.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just to piggyback on that, like, I don't know how many sales people that I have come in to coach that are just chasing, because they never established that with the homeowner or with the customer. And now you've got customers or homeowners that are dodging phone calls, trying not to open the door or answer the door because that communication was just never there to begin with. And it's like, That's such a toxic
You know,
relationship.
the way it was phrased to me once is, you don't put your kid to bed every night saying, "Oh, honey, I hope you grow up to be a wonderful salesperson." Because the stereotype salesperson is what the world has experienced
Yeah.
versus the consultative, strategic salesperson who really has a purpose, a reason, works for a company that is significant,
Yeah.
and they believe in that.
Yep.
And if they believe in it, then it's not about commissions anymore.
Yeah.
And I will put any purpose-driven sales team like yours up against any of its competitors. You will outsell them to 10 to 1 easily.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. Like that motivation uh, within the parameters of the right system is really powerful.
Yeah.
So when we think about how this and you or Sandler all together, and we'll talk about kind of the benefit that you bring marrying that Sandler piece here in a little bit. But if I'm a business owner and I'm looking at my business, and obviously sales is the lifeblood of really any company, right? If we
Sure.
don't have sales, we don't have work to perform, and that's important. If I have a sales team that's struggling, or I have a sales rep that's struggling, and I can't put my finger on it as a business leader, what is it about the Sandler method that solves my problem? What is it with this intense pain of I've got an underperforming sales team
Yeah.
or sales individual? Like, why is it any different than all of the rest of the sales programs that I'm going to send my people to or talk about?
Yeah, well, at least in my practice, and I can talk to that, is if somebody comes to me and says they have a problem with an individual that's not performing, the first thing I would do is assess their drives and motivators and their personality to make sure that at least that they have the right underpinnings to be a sales professional.
Mm.
There's certain motivations that, like helping people, that is a good piece. Being motivated is there's a certain drive that a salesperson has to have.
Yeah.
But, and I wouldn't want to invest training dollars into somebody, or at least have a conversation with somebody that isn't motivated to be in the job and be successful at it.
Yeah.
So the first thing is the person in the right seat.
Sure.
The second thing then is, where is the flaw in the thinking? That is, they don't know something that they should, or is it that they know what to do, but frankly, they're not doing it correctly? So this goes to trainability and coachability. And if they're trainable and coachable after a conversation, then I can prescribe a certain class for them, a certain curriculum to help them get from point A to point B. The inherent problem is if somebody comes to me with one person and that person starts to do really well, and the rest of the people aren't being trained in the same system, then there's a psychodynamic of politics and drama that starts to grow into it.
It happens.
And I would coach, like you, most companies to build a clonable, repeatable, and predictable sales system, which is everybody getting on the same page.
So for those that just need the sales coaching, sales management for dummies, why is clonable, repeatable, and scalable important in a sales department?
Yeah, well, nothing kills a company more than what we would call seasonal cash. The 3 months of summertime greatness and 9 months of horrible cash flow, right? Like that, nothing kills a company worse than that. And likewise, no company can exist if they get all of their annual income in the last month of the year. So having the right clients come in at the right time is not only predictable, but it is repeatable. So are we doing the right things consistently? And you know my training well enough to know I don't believe in doing huge amounts of anything. It's about doing enough correctly at the right time with the right clients to get the cash flow consistent, predictable.
Sure. And part of what I then reinforce with my people is that, even at the sales person level, right? There's the business level, which makes total sense. And then there's the salesperson level,
right?
Where, most salespeople fall into this trap of that they're riding the roller coaster up and things are great and they're closing everything they touch. And then, the law of averages kicks them in the teeth a little bit and they're doing this roller coaster thing.
Yep.
And so doing enough of the right things consistently now all of a sudden levels that out to where they don't have these big steep hills and valleys.
Right. And by the way, those cycles are pretty constant if you're not in what we call system
Yeah.
of doing those things. And just to claw back to the previous conversation, we added a word called clonable. So the thing about a business owner trying to grow his company is you better have more than one or two good salespeople.
Yeah.
You want to have a whole tribe of good salespeople. And the clonability is one of the key things. If John and Fred are doing it one way and Ted and Mary are doing it completely different, you're going to oscillate at some point. Your cash is going to go upside down on you.
Yeah. Well, and that's the clonability piece. This is a really interesting piece because every organization has their John or Fred that are just crushing it.
Right.
Right. And then they've got their other sales team members that are like, man, I would really like to be like John or Fred.
Right.
And part of what I see in my history is part of the problem is you'll have new sales reps that come on, or even existing sales reps that come on that say, I want to be just like John or Fred. But they don't sell like John and Fred sell.
Right.
John and Fred sell different than John and Fred. But every salesperson, every human being has this really unique, special thing about them that if they have a system and they have the right parameters, they can take that system and they can apply it and still maintain who they are in this unique, special thing. And Bjorn can sell like Bjorn.
That's right.
And stay in system of the Sandler sales tool that then puts me in a position to be really great, just as good as John
That's
and Fred,
right.
but I don't have to be like John and Fred. So I think that, a big piece to this is the clonability is not, I want you to be like Fred.
Right.
The clonability is, I want you to be in the same system that Fred is.
Right.
And still be the great, amazing, wonderful, unique person that you are, because that's what's going to help you sell.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I call it the pixie dust. Everybody brings pixie dust to the process, right? But we still follow the process. Step A is still step A for all of us,
Yeah.
right? And how do we introduce ourselves, or how do we listen to people? That's the process. The pixie dust is what Bjorn brings to the table, or what Mike brings to the table. And that's the magic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. People will trust me for a different reason than they would trust you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So if we rewind back for a business owner, like how does that impact the business? If I have 10 sales reps that are all in the same system, a clonable system, and they're all sprinkling their own pixie dust out there, like, what does that do for a company?
Man, this is an exciting part of this conversation for me because over the 30 years I've been doing this, how many hundreds of business owners have been able to grow and become either millionaires or sell their company and become millionaires because they attract so much great cash their way because their company's growing consistently over months and quarters, every quarter. So I look at it from the standpoint, one of the jobs that I have to do is help the business owner get to his final outcome. Why did you start this business?
Yeah.
And it could have been just to start a cash flow engine for you, like I need a job. But most companies, once they've matured and passed the 2-year toddler stage, they start thinking about how am I going to exit this thing?
Yeah.
And that's the reason this is so important. Is clonable, repeatable, and predictable means that I have an exit.
Right.
Whatever that exit is, retirement or selling it or becoming rich. I don't
Right.
care what the exit is, but
It makes it real.
yeah, that's when the traction of a good sales team really takes off, that's the benefit.
Yeah.
And the secondary benefit is, hey, I don't need to be micromanaging everything anymore. Like life gets so much easier when
Yeah.
cash flow is predictable and you can count on it and the team is motivated and growing and
Well, it gives time back, right?
Oh,
Like a
it's
CEO
huge.
that doesn't have to micromanage the sales team now all of a sudden has so much more time.
oh yeah, and they get to invest on the business versus working in the business.
Yeah.
And life gets good.
Yeah. One of the things that I think attracts most salespeople to sales, and you mentioned it earlier in our conversation, is the earning potential.
Yeah.
The income potential in sales. It's one of those unique roles that nobody can tell you how much money you can make. You get to dictate the amount of money that you make.
That's right.
If you're just a strict salaried employee, well, here's your salary and do a great job and you don't get fired. And we'll look at potentially increasing your salary if you do an excellent job.
Yeah.
Sales creates this environment where you are in control of your destiny and it's uncapped earning potential. And I think one of the really special things about this Sandler system and having that system in place that's clonable and repeatable and scalable is that as a salesperson, now I know my future roadmap. I know what the exit plan looks like for me to hit my target earnings. If I want to make $300,000 in a year, now all of a sudden there's a path.
Right.
Where without it, I think you have this hope that I can make $300,000 in a year, but what does that mean if you don't have that system in place? And
That's
so
right.
I love that about Sandler. It not only provides a path for the business owner and for the business, but for the individual earner, now all of a sudden they've got everything that they need to get to where they want to be. Whatever that is. It could be $300,000, it could be $500,000. I don't know, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, if you don't mind, what Bjorn is explaining to everybody is that we go through a cookbook process where people set goals for themselves above the company goals so that they can feed their family effectively, put money aside for retirement, all the things that they need to set goals for. And then we rewind out of that how much you need to sell and what you need to do on a daily basis in order to be accomplished. And that's what Bjorn is alluding to is this cookbook idea, so that you have a recipe for success. And if you need to make $300,000 in a year or $100,000 or $500,000, you actually have a recipe to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a step that gets missed for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
They come into a role and they're like, I'm going to go sell everything.
Yeah.
Okay. But how? And what are
Yeah.
you going to do? And, so,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, Mike, we're already at our time. And,
No way.
And it's gone by so fast. We could probably talk for hours and hours and hours about all the awesome things that are involved with sales and sales psychology and the Sandler system. We believe in what you do. There's a reason why we have you here every single week coaching our people and communicating these things to our people. I think the one benefit that I can give to anybody who's listening, whether it's a business owner or a homeowner, is that Mike is special. Mike has the pixie dust. Like if you think about Sandler, it is so solid. But the pixie dust on Sandler is Mike. And if you're a business here in this area that wants to take your business to the next level, if you're a business owner that's looking for a way to exit or make your company sellable or just generate more revenue for your sales team, like there is no other person that you can go to besides Mike to help grow your business. And so how do people find you? If they heard this and they're like, wow, I should probably get in contact with Mike, how do they find you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you feel free to call me. My number is 602-840-0003. A little slower this time. 602-840-0003. My website is conquesttraining.com, which is the big flashy website, big deal. If you want to schedule a time, you listen to this and you say you want to schedule a time with me, go to salescoachaz.com. There's a landing page there for you to actually get onto my calendar and schedule a time with me. Complimentary consultation for an hour, or if you just got a couple of questions you want answered, there's a 15-minute time slot there for me too.
Awesome. So salescoachaz.com or conquesttraining.com. You guys will not regret your time with Mike. He is so awesome. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that you're willing to come on the show today and just kind of share your knowledge with our audience.
I appreciate that, Bjorn, and likewise for you. It's a mutual admiration society that we have for each other.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well, again, everybody, thank you for joining us for our podcast today. You may or may not be able to see her. This is Molly. Mike brought his dog with him today.
She's not my dog. She's my director of happiness.
I'm sorry. His director of happiness came with him today. We'll put some pictures up at the end of this podcast so you can get a better look at Molly. But thank you again for joining us before the hammer strikes. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you're a homeowner and you're having conversations with salespeople that feel pushy, that feel friction-filled, you should probably invite them to take one of Mike's courses. They probably need it. And then come talk to TraVek and we'll give you the ultimate TraVek experience. Again, thank you, everybody. Join us again next week for Before the Hammer Strikes and have an awesome weekend.